I found a child's sock in the house my boyfriend begged me to move into. He denied knowing where it came from, so I called an unknown number from his phone. The woman who answered was his wife, and she just helped me plan his downfall. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The dust motes danced in the afternoon sunbeams, a silent, swirling ballet in a house that still refused to feel like home. 3 months. It had been 3 months since I'd packed up my entire life, a career I loved, an apartment that was my sanctuary, and a network of friends who were my chosen family, and moved 2,000 miles to be with Leo. He had called this a new beginning for us, an adventure. But as I pushed the vacuum cleaner across the unfamiliar hardwood floors of our sprawling suburban rental, the only adventure I felt was one of profound and echoing loneliness. The house was beautiful, I couldn't deny it. It was the kind of place you saw in magazines, with an open-plan living area, a kitchen island the size of a small car, and a backyard that faded into a stand of whispering pine trees. Leo had chosen it. He'd sent me a virtual tour, his voice buzzing with excitement through my phone speaker. "Imagine us here, Clara," he'd said. "Barbecues in the summer, a fireplace in the winter, no more shoebox apartments and city noise, just us." I had let his vision become mine. I was 31, a senior marketing manager with a clear path to an executive role. But I was also in love. 2 years with Leo had felt like a whirlwind of grand gestures and passionate promises. When his company had offered him a major promotion, regional sales director, that required relocating from the bustling city we met in to this quiet, leafy corner of the country, he'd presented it not as a dilemma, but as a destiny. He looked at me, his eyes full of earnest sincerity, and asked me to come with him. Quitting my job, he'd argued, was a blessing in disguise. "You work too hard anyway," he'd murmured, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "Take a break, set up our home. You can find something new when you're ready. We'll be a team." So I did it. I'd submitted my resignation, endured the tearful goodbyes, and put my faith in our future. But the future felt a lot like empty weekdays, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Leo's job was demanding. He traveled frequently, often for a few days at a time, leaving me to navigate a new town where I knew no one. The break he'd encouraged felt less like a vacation and more like an erasure of the person I used to be. That particular afternoon, I was waging war on the dust bunnies that had colonized the space under the living room sofa. I grunted, shoving the heavy piece of furniture a few inches from the wall. The vacuum's nozzle probed the dark corners, and then I saw it. Tucked against the baseboard, almost perfectly hidden, was a flash of color. I reached down, my fingers closing around something small and soft. It was a sock. A tiny, child-sized sock, striped in garish shades of neon green and orange. My brow furrowed. We didn't have any friends with children here. The only visitors we'd had were Leo's work colleagues for a stiff, formal dinner party a month ago, and they were all childless. My fingers probed the dusty floor again, and I felt something else, something solid. I pulled it out into the light. It was a matching shoe, a miniature sneaker, the kind a toddler would wear. It was scuffed at the toe, the Velcro strap half undone. I sat back on my heels, the sock in one palm and the shoe in the other. They felt alien, like artifacts from a different dimension. A cold, prickling sensation crawled up my spine. This wasn't just misplaced clutter. This was evidence of a person who had been in this house without my knowledge, a very small person. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. A previous tenant. The cleaning crew Leo had hired before we moved in. But these items weren't caked in old dust. They looked like they'd been lost recently. Holding the tiny shoe, I felt a wave of dizziness. It was so small, so intimate. It spoke of a life I knew nothing about, a life that had trespassed into the one I was trying so desperately to build. Leo was due home any minute from a 2-day sales conference in a neighboring state. Suddenly, his homecoming filled me with not warmth, but a sickening dread. I placed the sock and shoe on the polished surface of the coffee table, a silent, damning accusation. The lie was far more suffocating than the loneliness I'd been feeling for months. The sound of Leo's key in the front door made me jump. I had been sitting on the sofa for the better part of an hour, my gaze fixed on the little shoe and its matching sock. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I had replayed 1,000 scenarios in my head, but now that the moment was here, my mind was a blank white space of fear. "Clara, I'm home." He called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous entryway. He sounded cheerful, oblivious. He walked into the living room, dropping his briefcase by the door and loosening his tie. "Miss me?" He stopped short when he saw my expression. His smile faltered. "Hey, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." His eyes followed my line of sight to the coffee table. He stared at the child's sock and shoe, and for a split second I saw something flicker in his expression. It wasn't confusion. It was recognition. It was there and gone so fast I might have imagined it, replaced instantly by a look of mild bewilderment. "What's this?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. He picked up the tiny sneaker, turning it over in his large hands. "I found them," I said, my voice thin. "Under the sofa. Do you have any idea how they got there, Leo?" He tossed the shoe back on the table with a dismissive clatter. "How would I know? Must be from the old tenants, or maybe one of your friend's kids." "I don't have any friends here, Leo," I reminded him, the words tasting like ash. "And none of your colleagues have children. We've been over this." He sighed, a dramatic put-upon sound. "Okay, well, remember when Mark and his wife came over? A few months ago? Maybe they brought their nephew or something and didn't mention it. Who cares? It's a sock." "It's a sock and a shoe, Leo," I said, my voice gaining a desperate edge. "They weren't there a few months ago. I cleaned under there. They're recent." This is when his demeanor shifted. The mask of easygoing charm dissolved, replaced by a cold, hard irritation. "Clara, are you serious right now? I just got home from a grueling trip, and you're interrogating me about a piece of lost property. I'm exhausted. Can we not do this?" "Do what?" I'm asking a simple question. "No, you're not," he snapped, his voice rising. "You're doing what you always do, overthinking, spinning up these crazy theories in your head. It's a sock. A child's sock. Maybe a squirrel dragged it in for all I know. Why does it have to be some big conspiracy?" The accusations stung, sharp and unfair. He was taking my valid concern and twisting it into a flaw in my character. He was making me the problem, gaslighting. The clinical term popped into my head, and I felt a fresh wave of nausea. "A squirrel," I repeated numbly. "You think a squirrel dragged a matching sock and shoe into our house and hid them under the sofa?" "I don't know, Clara. It's a ridiculous thing to be fighting about," he exclaimed, throwing his hands up in exasperation. "I'm tired. I've been driving for hours. I don't know where some random kid's shoe came from, and I don't care. Are you going to keep obsessing over this, or can we have a normal evening?" I stared at him. The man I loved, the man for whom I had upended my entire world, was looking at me as if I were a stranger, an inconvenience. His denial was too quick, too aggressive. His anger was a shield, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that he was hiding something behind it. He saw the doubt in my eyes and his face softened, his tactics shifting. He came over and sat beside me, reaching for my hand. "Hey," he said softly. "I'm sorry, I'm just beat. Look, I promise you I have no idea where they came from. You have to trust me. It's just us, okay? Only us." I let him pull me into a hug, but my body was stiff, unresponsive. I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and a thought echoed through my mind, cold and clear. He was a good liar. A very, very good liar. I closed my eyes, feigning surrender, but my mind was worrying, calculating. He thought this was over. He thought he had successfully managed my paranoia. But he had forgotten one crucial thing. He had forgotten how observant I was, how I noticed everything. And he had forgotten that I had given up my career in marketing, a career built entirely on understanding what lies beneath the surface. As I lay in bed that night, feigning sleep while Leo snored softly beside me, my mind raced back to the life I had so willingly left behind. I thought of my sunny apartment in the city, the one with the slightly crooked balcony where my potted herbs thrived. I thought of my job. I hadn't just been a senior marketing manager. I had been good at it. I led a team that launched national campaigns. I lived for the thrill of a successful pitch, the camaraderie of a late-night brainstorming session, the satisfaction of seeing a project I'd nurtured from a single idea become a household name. My work wasn't just a job, it was a part of my identity. My friends were woven into that life, especially Maya. We had met as junior associates and had climbed the corporate ladder together, celebrating each other's victories and nursing each other's heartbreaks over cheap wine and expensive cheese. The night I told her I was moving with Leo, she had been supportive, but I saw the flicker of concern in her eyes. "Are you sure, Clara?" she had asked gently. "You're giving up so much." "It's for love," I said, a little too brightly. "It's an adventure." Now her words echoed in the silent, dark bedroom of my new, empty life. The adventure had been Leo's, not mine. I was just a passenger, and I was beginning to suspect I hadn't even been told the real destination. Leo himself had been the most compelling campaign of all. When we met, he was charisma personified. He had a magnetic smile, a quick wit, and a way of looking at you that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. He was a regional sales director, a title that sounded important and I now realized was conveniently vague. It provided the perfect cover for his frequent absences. "Big territory to cover," he would say with a charming shrug. "It's a grind, but it's setting us up for the future." He had been so persuasive about the move. He'd painted my high-pressure job not as an achievement, but as a source of stress I needed to be rescued from. "You deserve a rest, baby," he'd coo. "Let me take care of you for a while." At the time, it sounded romantic, chivalrous. Now it felt like a strategy, an isolation tactic. I remembered a conversation we'd had about finances a few weeks before the move. I had suggested keeping our accounts separate until I found a job and we were more settled. His face had clouded over. "Don't you trust me?" he'd asked, a wounded look in his eyes. "I thought we were a team. A joint account is about partnership, Clara. It's about building a life together. Don't you want that?" He made my practical suggestion feel like a personal rejection, a lack of faith in our relationship. I had caved, of course. I'd agreed to pool our savings, to let my final, hefty paycheck dissolve into a shared account that he primarily managed. He had a polished, almost slick, disingenuousness that I'd once mistaken for confidence. He always looked perfect, his suits immaculate, his shoes shined, not a hair out of place. He talked about loyalty and honesty as if they were his personal creed. "I can't stand liars," he'd said once, during a dinner where he recounted a story about a dishonest colleague. "It's a fundamental flaw in character. If you can't be honest, you have nothing." The hypocrisy of it all made my stomach turn. He had constructed an elaborate facade, and I had decorated it for him, calling it a home. The man sleeping beside me wasn't the partner I had followed across the country. He was an antagonist in my life story, a polished fraud who had sold me a beautiful, empty lie. And as I stared at the ceiling, the image of the tiny, scuffed sneaker burned in my mind. It was a clue. It was the loose thread on his perfectly tailored suit. And I knew, with the chilling certainty of a marketer who had just identified a fatal flaw in a competitor's product, that I was going to pull on that thread until his entire world unraveled. I lay there for what felt like hours, my body rigid, my breath a shallow whisper in the dark. Every time Leo shifted or mumbled in his sleep, my muscles clenched with a new wave of adrenaline. My mind, however, was unnervingly clear. The emotional fog of the evening had burned away, leaving behind the cold, hard mechanics of a problem that needed to be solved. My marketing brain, the part of me I thought I had packed away with my office wardrobe, was firing on all cylinders. The objective: uncover the truth. The primary obstacle: a charismatic, manipulative liar currently sleeping 2 feet away from me. The available assets: his unguarded phone. He had dismissed my concerns about the sock and shoe with such theatrical contempt. He had tried to make me feel small, crazy, and obsessive. It was a classic deflection tactic, designed to shut down the conversation and re-establish his control. But he had miscalculated. He didn't shut me down, he activated a part of me that had been dormant for months. The part that analyzed data, identified inconsistencies, and built strategies based on observable behavior. And his behavior was screaming guilt. Sometime after 2 a.m., when his breathing had deepened into a steady, rhythmic snore, I knew it was time. Slowly, meticulously, I slid my legs out from under the duvet, my feet touching the cold floor with practiced silence. I moved like a ghost through the shadows of the room, my heart a dull thud in my ears. His phone was on his bedside table, plugged into the charger, its screen dark. My own phone was in my hand, its flashlight function ready. It was a small, almost laughably domestic scene of betrayal. My fingers trembled as I reached for his phone. The cord made a soft, zipping sound as I unplugged it, a noise that sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. I held my breath, watching his sleeping form, but he didn't stir. I retreated from the bedroom, closing the door behind me with a barely audible click. I went to the kitchen, the furthest point from the bedroom, and sat at the enormous, sterile island. The moonlight streaming through the large windows cast long, distorted shadows across the floor. I turned on my phone's flashlight and aimed it at his. His passcode was his birthday. Of course it was, the first sign of a lazy liar. My thumb hovered over the screen. This felt like a monumental violation, a point of no return. But what choice did I have? He had already violated the very foundation of our relationship. Trust was a two-way street, and he had turned his side into a dead end. I typed in the 6 digits. The phone opened, a bright portal into his secret life. I ignored the texts and emails for now. I didn't want to get lost in a sea of mundane work conversations. I needed a signal, not noise. I went straight to the call log. My eyes scanned the list of recent calls. His boss, his mother, a few names I recognized as colleagues, and then I saw it. A number with no name attached. It wasn't just there once. It appeared over and over, woven into the fabric of his daily life. There was a call from that number this morning, just before he would have started the drive home. There were 2 calls the day before. There were calls late at night on previous business trips. They were never long, too, maybe 3 minutes like check-ins. My pulse quickened. This was it. This was the loose thread. My first instinct, the emotional, wounded one, was to hit redial right then and there and scream into the void. But the strategist in me took over. What would that accomplish? A confused, angry person on the other end, a denial, a hang-up. Leo would wake up to a missed call on his phone from the middle of the night, and my one element of surprise would be gone. He would lock everything down. No, I needed a plan, a cover. I needed to be in control of the conversation. What did I do when I needed information from a source that didn't want to give it? I created a believable pretext. I became someone else. I thought about the context. A man, a secret number, frequent short calls. It could be anything, but my gut, my screaming, terrified gut, was telling me it was a woman. And the sock and shoe on the coffee table were telling me it was a woman with a child. Okay. So who would be calling a woman connected to Leo that she wouldn't be suspicious of? A wrong number was too risky. A telemarketer wouldn't get any information. It had to be someone official, someone credible, someone doing a job, a delivery. It was perfect. It was mundane, plausible, and it required a confirmation of address and details. It would force the person on the other end to identify their relationship to the situation without even realizing they were doing it. I took a deep, shaky breath. My hands were slick with sweat. I looked at the number on his screen and memorized it, typing it into my own phone. I would call from my number, not his. That was crucial. I couldn't risk him ever finding a record of this call. I stood up and walked to the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. I needed air. I slid it open and stepped out onto the cold stone patio. The scent of pine and damp earth filled my lungs. The stars were bright and merciless in the vast, dark sky. I stood there under the silent gaze of the cosmos, my phone in my hand, and prepared to detonate my life. I pressed the call button. The phone rang, each electronic tone a hammer blow against my fragile composure. 1 ring, 2 rings. I almost hung up, a wave of panic and self-doubt washing over me. Was I really doing this? Was I ready for what I might find? 3 rings. Hello, a woman's voice. It was thick with sleep, soft and slightly groggy. My carefully rehearsed script flew out of my head. My throat was suddenly bone dry. I cleared it, trying to sound professional and detached. Hello, good evening. My name is Clara. I'm with Arrow Couriers. I'm trying to arrange a delivery for a Mr. Leo Vance. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear the faint sound of rustling fabric as if she were sitting up in bed. A delivery? Now, it's the middle of the night. My apologies for the late hour, I said, my voice gaining a bit of strength. I was a marketing manager. I could do this. I could sell this. Our system had a routing error, and a fragile package scheduled for priority morning delivery was left on the truck. I'm the night dispatch manager trying to sort it out before the morning rush. I just need to confirm the delivery address and a convenient time. Oh. She sounded less suspicious, more tiredly accommodating. Okay, well, what's the address you have on file? This was the moment of truth. I had no address. I was bluffing and my hand was empty. I had to make her offer the information. The system is flagging the one we have on file as incomplete. The street is Hawthorne Lane, but the house number is corrupted. Is that correct? I had plucked the street name from a real estate listing I'd seen for a neighboring town, a place he'd claimed to be visiting for work last month. Hawthorne Lane. She repeated, and now her voice held a note of genuine confusion. No, that's not right at all. We live on Oakwood Drive. Who is this package from? The word landed like a physical blow. It was the first brick in the wall of his lies to crumble. My heart hammered in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. The sender is listed as a corporate gift service. Ma'am, I can't give out more information than that. So, the correct address is on Oakwood Drive. Could you please spell that for me? Oakwood, she said slowly, and then she gave a house number. But my husband isn't expecting anything. He's very particular about deliveries. My husband? The world didn't just tilt on its axis, it stopped spinning altogether. The stars, the trees, the cold stone beneath my feet, it all vanished. The only thing that existed was that two-word bombshell. My husband. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me, the kind that comes in the aftermath of a catastrophic explosion. I see, I said, my voice a marvel of control. Leo Vance, the regional sales director for Sterling Corp., I needed to be absolutely certain. Yes, that's him, she said, and then her voice softened, a warmth creeping in that felt like a knife twisting in my gut. He's away on a work trip right now, one of his long ones. He'll be gone for another week at least. You know how it is. No, I didn't know how it was. My Leo, the Leo who lived with me, was sleeping in our bed, 50 feet away. He had come home from a 2-day conference this evening. The lies were so vast, so intricate, they were almost impressive. He wasn't just cheating. He was living a complete, fully realized double life. Then came the final, devastating piece of the puzzle. A small voice cried out in the background on her end of the line. A child's voice. Mommy, I had a bad dream. The woman on the phone side, a familiar maternal sound. Just a minute, sweetie, Mommy's on the phone. She spoke back into the receiver, her voice hurried now. Listen, I have to go. My son just woke up. Just leave the package at the depot, and my husband will sort it out when he's back. My son, the neon green and orange sock, the tiny, scuffed sneaker. It all clicked into place with horrifying, perfect synergy. He had brought his son here, to my house, to our house. He had brought his other life into mine and had lied to my face about it. Of course, I said, my own voice sounding distant and foreign. I'm sorry to have disturbed you. It's fine, good night. She hung up. I stood there on the patio, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dead air. The call had lasted maybe 3 minutes. In 3 minutes, my world had been irrevocably shattered. Leo wasn't just my boyfriend who was acting suspiciously. He was someone's husband. He was someone's father. And what was I, the other woman? The long-term, live-in mistress. The fool who had dismantled her own life for a man living a lie. The cold fury that began to replace the shock was absolute. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had betrayed this woman, Hannah, and their little boy. This wasn't a confrontation to be had. This was a war to be won. I slid the glass door shut, the soft snick of the lock echoing the definitive closing of a chapter in my life. I walked back through the silent house, each step sure and steady. The fear and confusion were gone, replaced by a crystalline, diamond-hard certainty. I was no longer a victim of his deception. I was the architect of his downfall. When I re-entered the bedroom, the sight of him sleeping peacefully felt like a profound insult. He lay there, oblivious, the picture of innocence, while the lives of at least 2 women lay in ruins around him. I looked at his face, the face I had once thought was the kindest and most handsome I had ever seen, and I felt nothing. No love, no sadness, not even anger anymore. It was the detached interest of a scientist observing a particularly loathsome specimen under a microscope. The scope of his betrayal was breathtaking. He wasn't just a cheat, he was a logistical mastermind of deceit. The long-term work assignments he told his wife about were his life with me. The frequent business trips he told me about were his weekends at home with his family. He had 2 homes, 2 lives, 2 women who were financing his fantasy, one with her love and dedication, the other with her wifely duty and, I presumed, a shared history. And the child. He had brought his child into my home, our shared space, and then had the audacity to make me feel insane for questioning it. My first impulse was to pack a bag and run, disappear into the night and never look back. But where would I go? My money was tied up in our joint account. My car was in both our names. My belongings were all here, in his trap of a house. A sudden, emotional departure was exactly what he would expect from the overly sensitive, paranoid girlfriend he had tried to paint me as. It would allow him to control the narrative, to tell his wife I was a crazy ex who couldn't let go. No, I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. My departure wouldn't be a frantic escape, it would be a strategic withdrawal. I retreated to the spare bedroom that I had been trying to turn into a home office and closed the door. I sat on the floor, my back against the wall, and pulled out my phone. My fingers flew across the screen as I dialed the one person in the world I could trust implicitly. Maya answered on the second ring, her voice groggy but immediately alert. "Clara, what's wrong? It's 4 in the morning there." "He's married," I said, no preamble, no tears, just the cold, hard fact. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "What? Say that again." I told her everything. The sock, the shoe, his aggressive denial, the nameless number, the late-night call and the character I had played. I recounted my conversation with the tired, unsuspecting woman named Hannah. I told her about the husband, the house on Oakwood Drive, and the little boy who had a bad dream. Maya listened without interruption, a skill that made her both an excellent friend and a brilliant strategist. When I finished, the silence on the line was heavy. Then she spoke, and her voice was no longer that of a sleepy friend, but of a crisis manager. "Okay," she said, her tone flinty. "Okay, Clara, listen to me. First things first, you are brilliant. That was an incredibly smart and brave thing to do. Second, we are going to burn him to the ground." A small, hysterical laugh escaped my lips. "How? I'm 2,000 miles away from everyone I know, I have no job, and my money is in his account." "Details, details," Maya said dismissively. "This is a marketing problem. He has a brand, 2 of them actually, and we are about to orchestrate the most spectacular brand implosion in history. But first, logistics. Tomorrow morning, first thing, you are going to the bank. You are going to tell them you need to withdraw half of the balance in cash. If they ask why, you tell them you're buying a car. Don't use a debit card, don't make a transfer, take the physical cash. Then, you are going to open a new account at a completely different bank in your name only." "He'll see the withdrawal," I said. "Let him, he'll be on a business trip soon enough, won't he? When he asks, you'll tell him it's for new furniture, a home project. Lie to him, Clara, use his own methods against him. While he's gone, you pack, you don't take the furniture, you take you, your clothes, your documents, anything that is personally and sentimentally yours. You FedEx it to my apartment. We'll book you a one-way flight." The plan was so clear, so actionable, it gave my swirling rage a direction. "What about her?" I asked quietly. "Hannah and their son." "I can't just disappear. He'll just continue to lie to her." "Exactly," Maya said, her voice dropping. "And that's the beautiful, final step of this campaign. You don't confront him. You don't give him a tearful goodbye. You do nothing. You leave. And once you are safely on a plane with your money in your new account, you are going to forward all the evidence to the one person who can hold him accountable. You're going to send an anonymous email to his wife. The next 3 days were a masterclass in duplicity. I moved through the house like a phantom, a smiling, accommodating ghost of the woman I had been. I was the perfect partner. I made his favorite meals. I asked about his day, nodding with feigned interest as he recounted fabricated stories of conference calls and difficult clients. I even apologized for being so emotional and paranoid about the sock and shoe, blaming it on my idleness and promising to be more trusting. He soaked it up, his ego preening. He saw my compliance not as the calm before the storm, a strategic retreat, but as a victory. He had successfully managed me, put my silly fears to rest, and restored order to his carefully compartmentalized world. He became more affectionate, more magnanimous, as if rewarding a dog for learning a new trick. It was sickening, and it was exactly what I needed. On Wednesday morning, he packed his overnight bag. "Just a quick trip to the regional office," he said, kissing my forehead. "I'll be back tomorrow night, don't miss me too much." "I'll try to manage," I said with a smile that felt like it would crack my face. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, Operation Scorched Earth began. I followed Maya's plan to the letter. The bank withdrawal was surprisingly easy. The young teller barely looked up as she counted out thousands of dollars in crisp $100 bills. I felt a surge of power as I walked out of the bank, the cash a heavy, tangible symbol of my reclaimed independence. The new account at a different credit union was opened within the hour. Back at the house, I worked with a furious, focused energy. I didn't pack everything. That would take too long. I was ruthless. I packed 3 large boxes with the things that mattered: my professional wardrobe, my personal documents, photos of my friends and family, the few heirlooms I'd inherited from my grandmother, and my favorite books. I drove to a shipping store and sent them all to Maya's address in my old city. The clerk charged my new secret debit card. Then I went back to the house. His house, I now called it in my head, and prepared the final stage. My plan had evolved slightly from Maya's. An anonymous email felt too detached, too easy for him to dismiss as a prank or a malicious lie from a crazy ex. No, this required a personal touch, a more public, undeniable form of humiliation. I had learned from my conversation with Hannah that Leo's parents were hosting a big anniversary party for themselves that coming Saturday. Leo had mentioned it to me weeks ago, saying he'd have to fly out for a family thing that weekend. He'd even expressed regret that I couldn't come, as it was just for close family. The irony was a bitter pill. Now I saw the party for what it was, the perfect stage. I booked a one-way flight for Friday morning. I packed one small suitcase with enough clothes for a few days. Then I wrote a letter. It was short, simple, and devastating. I detailed the timeline of our relationship, my move, and the life we had built. I enclosed a copy of the lease for our rental house, with both our names clearly visible. I included a printout from our joint bank account, showing the massive deposit from my final paycheck. And for the final, brutal touch, I took a picture of the neon-striped sock and tiny sneaker and printed it in full color. I placed everything in a large manila envelope. On the front, in my neatest handwriting, I wrote one name, Hannah Vance. On Saturday evening, I was sitting in Maya's apartment, a glass of wine in my hand, when my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number from Leo's area code. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it buzzed again, and again, and again. The calls kept coming, one after another, frantic and insistent. Maya looked at me from across the room. "It's starting," she said, a grim satisfaction in her voice. Finally, a text message appeared. It was from Leo. "Clara, what have you done? Call me now." Another text seconds later. "My wife is here, at my parents' anniversary party. How could you do this to me?" And then a third text, the one that made it all worthwhile. "She has the sock." I imagined the scene, a happy family gathering. Leo, the successful son, playing the part of the devoted husband. And then the arrival of a woman, a courier, perhaps, with a special delivery just for the wife. I had paid a local service a handsome fee to deliver the manila envelope to Hannah Vance at precisely 7 p.m. at the party's address. with instructions to ensure it was handed directly to her. I imagined her confusion, her opening the envelope, her eyes scanning the documents. I imagined the dawning horror on her face as she looked from the lease agreement to the bank statement to the full-color photo of her own son's shoe found in another woman's house. I imagined her turning to the man beside her, the man who was her husband, and the single, soul-destroying question she would ask in front of his entire family. Who is Clara? The phone in my hand buzzed again. It was a call from Hannah. This time I answered. "Hello," I said, my voice quiet. "It's Hannah." Her voice was shaking, but it was laced with a steel I hadn't heard that night on the phone. "He's not here. He ran. He got in his car and he just ran." I could hear the murmur of voices in the background, a party that had come to a screeching halt. "Are you okay?" I asked, the question feeling impossibly inadequate. "No," she said, and for the first time, a sob broke through her composure. "But I will be. I wanted to say thank you. You didn't have to do it this way. You could have just left. But you gave me the truth. You gave it to me in a way that no one could deny." We talked for nearly an hour. She told me how she had walked into the middle of the party's pristine lawn, held up the picture of the sock, and asked Leo, in front of his parents and all their friends, to explain where their son had been last Tuesday. The color had drained from his face. He'd stammered, lied, and tried to drag her away for a private conversation. But his mother had stepped forward, a formidable woman who, it turned to be, had never fully trusted her son's slick charm. She had looked at the evidence in Hannah's hand and then at her son, and had simply said, "Leonard, you tell your wife the truth right now." Instead, he had fled. In the weeks that followed, Leo's perfectly constructed empire crumbled. Hannah, armed with the evidence I had provided, immediately filed for divorce, securing a lawyer who ensured Leo's financial deceptions were laid bare. His parents, utterly humiliated and disgusted by his actions, sided with their daughter-in-law, providing her with financial and emotional support and effectively disowning their only son. They made it clear that their relationship with their grandson was paramount, and Leo's access to that relationship would be entirely at Hannah's discretion. Professionally, his life imploded as well. In his panicked attempts to do damage control, he made mistakes. He missed meetings. He dropped the ball on major accounts. Word of his catastrophic divorce and the scandalous reasons behind it began to circulate among his colleagues. The man whose brand was built on an image of confident stability was now seen as a reckless, untrustworthy liability. Within 6 months, Sterling Corp restructured his position out of existence. I never spoke to Leo again. He left me dozens of angry, pleading, and finally pathetic voicemails, which I forwarded to Hannah's lawyer and then deleted without listening. The house in the suburbs was a rental nightmare he was left to untangle alone. The joint car was sold, and I received a check for my half. As for me, I landed on my feet. Maya's agency, as it turned out, had an opening. My old boss was thrilled to have me back, and my story, which I shared only with a trusted few, had become a quiet legend. My experience with Leo hadn't broken me, it had sharpened my instincts. I was more decisive, more confident, and had zero tolerance for dishonesty. I poured the energy I had once dedicated to him into my career, and it flourished. Hannah and I still text occasionally. We are not friends, the circumstances of our meeting are too strange for that, but we are allies bound by a shared, bizarre trauma. She is rebuilding her life and her son is happy. She once sent me a picture of him on his first day of school, and he was wearing a brand new pair of sneakers. I smiled. Sometimes, when I'm working late, I'll look out my window at the city lights, and I'll think of that big, empty house in the suburbs. I don't feel anger or sadness anymore. I just feel a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for a tiny, discarded sock, a scuffed little shoe, and the gut feeling that told me not to ignore them. They weren't just lost objects, they were a key. They were the key that unlocked the door to my prison and set me free.